Our dearest Lady Furina is soon to return. However, there's one particular unit that I feel is giving her a run for her Mora. That'd be none other than Shilonen. So which one is truly the best unit in Genshin? Let's discuss that today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So in order to begin comparing these two, we're gonna have to dissect their buffing qualities. I'm first gonna look at their qualities at C0R1 and then C2R1. The reason for this is that these are both two of the potential strongest 5-star characters in the game. It's very realistic that people are gonna be interested in attaining more copies of them over time due to their innately high value and extreme longevity. Starting with C0R1, we're looking at a backloaded 75% damage bonus percent from our beloved Lady Furina. I believe most of us understand what a buff being backloaded is at this stage, but if you don't, then the most basic explanation would be that it's a buff that you don't get immediately. It ramps up over time, so you don't get the full value of the buff instantly. You more realistically get an average of 50% extra damage bonus from your dear Hydro Archon, unless you're playing a character who can max out her fanfare generation really quickly. For example, Mr. Settle Down is one of the best abusers of her damage bonus percent buff in the entire game, because he drains and gains HP so quickly. Her signature weapon doesn't add any buffing qualities to the character, so more HP percent for her, which is cool, and it aids her skill damage. Otherwise, that's the extent of her C0R1 buffing. You can put her on 4-piece tenacity, which is a tactic that some speedrunners like to employ to buff up their main DPS some more, but generally speaking, a majority of the player base is going to be building her on 4-piece Golden Troop to take advantage of a sub-DPS that her 3 little guys are capable of dealing. That's another thing to take note of. Furina has some sub-DPS to her. How much that actually matters at C0R1 will fluctuate depending on the buffers that you're using in a team. Ironically, pairing her with a Shilonen is going to make her own damage matter a lot more, compared to when you use her in a team that doesn't buff her all that much, or features buffs that are irrelevant to boosting the performance of her 3 little guys. I would like to add that if you put Furina on Key of Kaj, then she can actually provide her team with a good bit of EM. This is especially relevant in vape teams. I'm gonna stick with Splendor as our assumption for the sake of consistency, but I did want to throw that in there. There's also her Hydro application, which is inconsistent as it may be, as her 3 little guys will spout out Hydro whatever intervals that they feel like. It still tends to be enough to fuel most vape teams. So there's that aspect here too, but if we focus on buffing qualities alone, then there is simply her damage bonus percent provisions being really high. Like, really high. But the backload is really important to account for, because certain characters are going to take better advantage of it as opposed to others. Something to note is that our dear Hydro Archon enables 4-piece hunters for every DPS in the game. Sure, Codex is total mayonnaise hunter's power creep, but the key difference is that not every DPS character can trigger Codex, as it requires Night Soul consumption in order to function. Furina can grant any character HP loss mechanics. There's a lot more to consider when evaluating this character, not just her fanfare generation, as you'll come to find out. With Shilonen, she is not really a Furina replacement, not at all. As I stated earlier, it's more like they work together. She was intended as an upgraded second Kazuha, once again, not replacing him either. I believe all 3 of these units to be sitting in S tier at the moment. With that being said, I don't think it's hard to believe that she is a contender for the new #1 unit in Genshin. A few people have told me that they feel this way, and it's a very plausible train of thought. Let's think about it more closely here. Shilonen offers 40% damage bonus upfront from 4-piece Intercity. This on its own really isn't that special anymore, because a lot of not-long characters can do that. But it's her ability to do this in almost every team in the game that matters, while being able to proc it so freaking quickly. This buff is unconditional, and requires no build-up time. She heals your party, which is mostly useful for fanfare ironically enough, and is able to buff one more team element as opposed to Kazuha. That being Geo teams, which is relevant when you consider how strong Navia is currently, though Furina can work fine in those too, given that there's a healer around. She offers up to 36% Red Shred when you max out her skill, and while that's 4% less than VV, the uptime is 5 seconds longer than 4 VV. That's honestly a huge deal. Also, if you had Shilonen her signature weapon, suddenly, she's not so far off of Furina's 75% damage bonus. An R1 Peak Patrol Song offers 25.6% damage bonus when maxed out, so that's 65.6% damage bonus in total. Mind you, that 75% from C0 Furina is backloaded. The DJ Cat's buffs are not. Genuinely cannot overstate how insane that is. She can also abuse Archaic Petra, which is relevant when you consider that it isn't really that hard for her to crystallize and pick up the shard. Her field time is really fast, so you don't waste a lot of time picking up the crystal. This matters because Hoyo still hasn't added any new Notlon support sets yet. All Notlon supports are running 4-piece Intercity, or have to find alternatives so that they're not all running Intercity. Petra lets her grant characters a 35% damage bonus, though it does have a drawback of only buffing one single element at a time. The DJ Cat does lack her own sub-DPS, but considering that you typically play her as a 3rd or 4th slot support unit with other sub-DPSs already in the team, that's fine. She doesn't have to do literally every job under the sun. Her resume is pretty packed already. DJ, Blacksmith, and an insane support unit. Also, if there's something else that's really massive about this character, it's that she can enable DPS Moeka teams. Considering that she's currently the strongest DPS in the game, that's incredibly relevant. Sure, Sitlali can achieve the same goal, and considering that those two are best paired together, that might mean Shilonen's Night Soul enabling is less relevant. Sure, but then I'd like you to consider teams where the Exalted Pyro Archon is being played as an all-field support. The DJ Cat can offer her quick Night Soul consumption to build Fighting Spirits up for her easily, and that's a case in which the Crazy Granny might not be actively used. Also, because Moeka and Sitlali ran at the same time, it's fairly realistic to assume that many motorcyclist fans missed out on the grandmother to prioritize picking up the region's Archon. Being able to enable both of Moeka's playstyles is seriously no joke, and should not be underestimated. Because she has practically zero field time, she is easily the greatest enabler of the Exalted Pyro Archon that we currently have around. Both of these characters are literally Nutella-packed of value. Sorry, I don't like jam that much, except in Jaffa Cakes. I love Jaffa Cakes. Anyways, you get the idea. These units are so neck and neck in value. It's easy to value Shilonen a little higher than Kazuha, because she is essentially just Kazuha Pro Max. But when you consider overall account value between these two, it's more ambiguous. I'll throw in that both are pretty good Favonius abusers too. Felt like that was worth a mention, since white energy particles are so valuable when needed. Alright, time for things to get sticky as we introduce Constellations into the mix. So CTR1 for both. We start with our Dearest Lady Furina. C1 is big. It allows her to compete with 4-piece Intercity, as she immediately grants the team 37.5% damage bonus upon casting her burst, assuming that your Dear Hydro Archon's burst is crowned. That's because when it's crowned, it has a multiplier of 0.25, and you attain 150 fanfare points from the immediate cast. Her max provision limit increases from 75% to 100% too, so characters that could easily abuse her mechanics gain even more value. Very relevant when you consider that the second best DPS in the game right now is Mr. Settle Down. Also, very relevant in general, since all of the teams on your account are going to be experiencing an increased amount of buffing from her. Teams that might not have reached the full 75% cap before will be reaching at least 70 to 80% damage bonus easily with a C1. Furina's C2 retroactively increases the value of using a Hydro Goblet on her, and a damaging weapon. Speeding up her fanfare gain means that she is 100% outperforming Cinder City at base. Haha, get it? Because all of your teams are getting the max 100% damage bonus percent now. And the fact that she gives herself so much HP means that you can opt for a Hydro Goblet on her. That increases her damage output by a great amount, while still allowing you to max out her buffs effectively. Her signature weapon increases in value too, since her own damage feels a lot more relevant. Even so, I'm gonna shill Uraku Misugiri or Key of Caution Isut for overall account value here, seeing as Splendor really is Furina locked. You'll get way more value out of Key or Uraku. Her C3 does indeed push the buffing insanity even further, but we're gonna cap things out at C2 here to keep things attainable. I think Furina's Constellations still remain as some of the best forms of high primogen based investment that you can make on a Genshin Impact account on the whole. Genuinely. Alright, now how about the DJ Cat? Well, her C1 really isn't much to write home about. Interruption res and better exploration. Gamer. Definitely not as prestigious as Lady Furina C1. However, then you arrive at her C2. Goodness me. The Hydro buff is what makes the C2 so good in my opinion. Previously, the only form of HP buffing we had in the game was C4 Yulan. I suppose Hydro Resonance too, but that's not really a character buff, more so a benefit of good team building. However, 45% HP. Dude, pair her with Novelette, and well, there's a reason as to why I call this particular team the Celestia Killer Comp. It doesn't matter how bad the Spiral Abyss gets, or how good it gets, or how mid, or how disastrous, or how whatever. This team will forever reign supreme, even in this Moeka-ridden day and age. Because the Exalted Pyro Archon, Father and Father Son are such good main DPSs, I don't want to sleep on how good the extra 45% attack is either. That's a high amount of attack, my friend. A super significant increase to damage output, especially when stats like damage bonus are so much easier to come by these days. To be honest, I think Furina C wanted to have more overall value, mostly because Shilonen C1 is kind of a bust. But if you're an avid settle down enjoyer, I do not want to undersell the C2. It's freaking insane, and that is an understatement. Okay, but when it comes to versatility, it's a bit goofy, because they have pretty much the exact same amount of versatility. Both of them are every team in the game with the exception of Bloom characters. I mean, shoot, I guess you could force Furina into Nilu teams, but that's a big waste of damage bonus percent buffing. You get the general idea though. They both work quite frankly everywhere. If you've been following me for a while, you will know fully well by this stage that I literally could not give a hoot about a character working everywhere. The teams that they work in have to actually be good for me to consider their versatility to be effective. Yet in this case, when I say every team, I mean that 95% of the teams in this game are going to want to use these characters. There is genuinely a minimal amount of situations in which either of these two are going to be totally useless to you. With Furina, bring along a healer and you're good to go. With the DJ Cat, make sure that there's two non-ammo or non-Dedro elements in the same team, and you're good to go. It's actually kind of stupidly ridiculous as to how versatile these units are. They make every single character good. You know how back in the day, people would complain about really powerful character showcases yelling, "You used better than Kazuha"? I would say that the modern insane core would be Furina and Shilonen. They are genuinely true partners in crime. Though each has some minor setbacks, Furina obviously wants a healer, but considering that the DJ Cat does that, and other high-value characters such as Bennett and Qianyan are healers, that's not that big of a deal. Hoyoverse gives almost every new modern support healing capabilities, or synergy with healers, because they know how big of a deal our beloved Lady Furina is. Peak character getting the attention she deserves, you love to see it. Anyways, you get the idea. Needing a healer is not that terrible, when most teams will naturally have one in the first place. What's more of a setback is that Sitlali Melt is stronger than Furina Vape for most modern Pyro DPSs these days, so she's no longer the definitive best in slot in those situations anymore, assuming that both characters are at C0 or 1. She also can't enable Moika with Night Soul in the way that Sitlali or the DJ Cat can. With Shilonen, her setback is not being able to buff Animo or Dendro DPSs. This is something that Furina very much can do, being a part of Xiao's best in slot team, and being really good for characters like Flicker. Those DPSs are good, so this is indeed relevant, but I'd say that being able to buff Navia teams is an excellent trade-off. And losing best in slot status in Pyro DPS teams is a bigger loss than not being able to buff some high A-tier DPSs. At least this grants her a level of teammate efficiency, so you can run a Shilonen-less team on one half, and a team with her on the other. So both have the highest effective versatility in the game, it's not even close. The only other unit to have this much effective versatility would be Bennett and Kazuha. Literally nobody else compares, it's ridiculous. But I think that the DJ Cat working in the current best team in the game gives her the win in this situation, even if she hypothetically works in a few less teams than Furina. Okay, now it's time for the deeper whale talk. That's right, we're talking C3 to 6, ladies and gentlemen. And also, which character's constellation lineup is more worth it on the whole? I will say this up front. I'm front-loading my opinion on the matter, if you will. Lady Furina's constellations take the cake, and it's not even close. Shilonen C2 is the only standout card in her entire kit. Her C4 aids the team's damage through offering death-based damage procs, and her C6 turns herself into a DPS while healing the whole team as she does so. Basically the same as Furina C6, except unlike her, she doesn't have access to vaping her hits. C3 does offer more res shred, which is indeed very cool, but the rest of her lineup doesn't hold a candle to what our dearest Hydro Archon has going for her. C3 increases her burst's fanfare conversion to 0.31% when it's crowned, so have fun generating more damage percent per stack. C4 almost eliminates any of her ER requirements. Keyword is almost, but you're still able to get away with building significantly less ER in exchange for investing more into damaging stats. At this stage, unless you need the white particles, Favonius becomes super redundant. You really want Splendor, Uraku, or Ki for her at this stage. C5 mostly just helps out the damage that her three little guys do, and then C6 is similar to Shilonen's, turning her into a DPS which heals her whole team while she's at it, but she can vape, while also covering as her own fanfare generator while she's at it. While I 100% think that getting C2 DJ Cat is 1,000,000,000% worth your primos, when we look at holistic lineups, if we look at them as supports alone, then you're able to go up to C5 on Furina, arguably C3 for both if buffing is all you care about, but C4 has great utility, and C5 is great when you consider how good Furina's damage is at that stage, but with Shilonen, C3, take it or leave it. I will say that peak patrol song refinements are some of the most worthwhile 5-star weapon refinements in the game, due to how it can increase our damage bonus percent buffing value, but because of how the character banner is generally more worthwhile, even with the one fate point system, this information isn't very relevant. Character constellations will always do more for you than getting R2 on patrol song could ever hope to do. Don't worry buddy, you tried your best. In truth, getting C6 Moika, Mualani, or Arlecchino was more worth it if you want to see 6 DPS. But between these two, in terms of holistic constellation lineup value, Furina wins. Easily. Okay, time for the verdict. No, not that one. I meant which one truly deserves the throne of the #1 best meta character in all of Genshin Impact. At C0R1, I'm gonna have to hand it to Shilonen. She's a part of the current best team in the game, and Lady Furina is sadly not. This fact to me beats out anything else. And Shilonen continues to be present in every other extremely meta team in the game, whereas our beloved Lady Furina is not a must. At C2R1, then I will give it to Furina, because the issue is that at C0, she's competing with 4-piece Center City. C1 alone is able to help her compete with that far more easily, while also massively upgrading what she offers to teams. At C3 to 6, Furina wins, because Shilonen's last couple of Constellations really don't feel all that Genshin impactful for the character, and you're also able to play around a whole lot more with Lady Furina C6. So, lower investment players, the DJ Cat will be your best bet. However, with that being said, I would still pull both, as they are so neck and neck in value that it's ridiculous. Both are some of the biggest upgrades that your account could ever see, but in total honesty, I would recommend picking up at least Furina C1 for anybody who's had her since her last banner. It'll help her keep up with the rising standards of character gear. This topic was recently brought up to me, and I was mulling it over for a while, because I believe in Furina's meta supremacy so strongly. But I can 100% see the argument for Shilonen being better. This is a cake versus ice cream situation. Both are absolute game changers that should be welcomed onto any account, regardless of who is slightly better than the other. The true good ending would be to acquire both. But it's still interesting to evaluate this, as Furina was the most universally agreed upon #1 for such a long time. But I'd say that Shilonen is a genuine competitor for her throne. I'd like to specify that I don't think a C0R1 DJ Cat is better by kilometers upon kilometers. But, following how I feel about the best option being above all else, I have to stick to my guns, and acknowledge how she edges out in relevancy, thanks to being the best in slot 4th slot support in the best team in the game. But what do you think about all of this? Has our dearest Lady Furina fallen from her #1 spot? Or do you think that she still retains her lofty meta throne? Let me know down below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturdays starting from 3 PM UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to ask you the question of whether Lady Furina is still Genshin's #1 character or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and let's just be real folks, we're all just gonna end up using the two in the same teams together anyways.